San Francisco used to mean something. It meant the future. It meant tech money and golden light and fog rolling over the bay and a city so magnetic that people came from everywhere and stayed forever. That was the story. That's the postcard. So explain to me why, right now, you can walk through downtown San Francisco and count more empty storefronts than open ones. Explain why office towers that were fully leased 5 years ago are sitting dark. Explain why the city that invented the modern economy is staring down a nearly $1 billion budget deficit and a population that has shrunk by over 70,000 people since its peak. San Francisco isn't dead, but it is in a fight for its life. And nobody in power wants to give you the full picture. So let's do it. Start with the number that should be on the front page of every newspaper in America. Office vacancy in San Francisco hit 34.8% by mid-2025. That's nearly 35% of all office space in the city sitting empty. Before the pandemic, it was 3 to 4%. That's not a slowdown. That's a structural collapse. And it didn't happen by accident. The rise of remote and hybrid work gutted downtown's entire economic model overnight. San Francisco's downtown was never just offices. It was an ecosystem. Office workers filled the coffee shops and lunch spots and bars and dry cleaners and gyms that kept everything else alive. When the workers stopped showing up, the ecosystem collapsed. Office badge scans were hovering at less than 50% of pre-pandemic levels through all of 2025. Half the offices, half the foot traffic, half the spending. That hits every business downstream, and it hits city tax revenues hard. The result? A city budget deficit that has ballooned to somewhere between $876 million and $1 billion, depending on the projection you look at. That's not a rounding error. That's a city running out of money to fund itself. Now let's talk about the businesses, because this is where it gets visceral. More than 150 companies have left San Francisco in recent years, not relocated a few people. Left. Major names. Chevron went to Texas. Oracle moved its headquarters. Charles Schwab relocated to Westlake, Texas. Google didn't renew its lease at One Market Plaza, one of the most prestigious waterfront addresses in the city, effective April 2025. And then there's the mall. The San Francisco Center, once valued at $1.2 billion, is now worth less than $200 million. Nordstrom left after 35 years, citing dramatic changes in the market. Bloomingdale's followed. The mall's occupancy collapsed from 96% to 7%. 7%. The operator, Westfield, defaulted on a $558 million loan and handed the keys back to lenders. One downtown office tower sold for 75% below its 2020 price. Union Square retail vacancy dipped below 22%. That's Union Square, the historic heart of San Francisco shopping, sitting nearly a quarter empty. Walk through Powell Street today and count the for lease signs. You will lose count. Here's where people want to reduce this to a simple political argument. The city is liberal, therefore the city failed. Look, that framing is too convenient, and it lets you avoid the harder structural truths. Yes, crime and homelessness are real and visible problems in San Francisco. Yes, open drug markets in the Tenderloin and visible fentanyl use on sidewalks have deterred foot traffic and scared off businesses and tourists. That's undeniable. But experts at CBRE and analysts who actually study urban economies will tell you the picture is more complicated. The rise of remote work, a trend far bigger than any single city's politics, rewrote the logic of being downtown anywhere. San Francisco just happened to be more exposed than most because of its overwhelming dependence on tech, and tech workers went remote faster and harder than almost any other industry. When the workers didn't come back to the office, downtown didn't come back either. The homelessness crisis and drug crisis made everything worse, but they didn't cause the vacancy crisis on their own. That requires honesty to say because it means the solution isn't simple. And let's talk about the people leaving. San Francisco lost nearly 34,000 residents between 2019 and 2023, ranking it among the 4 counties with the largest population declines in the entire United States during that period. Only Los Angeles, Cook County in Chicago, and Baltimore County lost more. The city is currently declining at a rate of about 1.4% per year. The 2026 population is estimated around 804,000, down from a peak of 875,000 in 2020. That's 70,000 people gone. And here's who is leaving. Not the ultra-wealthy. Not the billionaires anchored to their Pacific Heights mansions. It's the middle. The teachers and nurses and young families and mid-level professionals who got priced out of housing during the tech boom and who can now work remotely from Sacramento or Austin or Portland and live in 3 times the square footage for half the rent. San Francisco's median rent is still among the highest in the country. You are paying a massive premium to live in a city that is currently giving you emptied streets, underfunded services, and a transit system in financial crisis. The math stops working. Which brings us to BART. Before the pandemic, BART covered nearly 70% of its operating costs from fare revenue alone. An unusually high level of self-funding for any transit system in the world. Now it's staring at a $375 million structural deficit. To close that gap purely with fares, ridership would need to more than double from current levels. That is not happening. Average weekday ridership in 2025 was running at roughly 45% of pre-pandemic levels, not 80%, not 90%. 45%, and that matters far beyond the transit agency's balance sheet. BART is the circulatory system of the Bay Area economy. Without it functioning at full capacity, getting workers downtown becomes harder. Tourism becomes harder. Events become harder. Everything tethered to people moving through the city becomes harder. The city is applying for a state bridge loan. They're hoping for a 2026 ballot measure to authorize new taxes. None of that is guaranteed, and in the meantime, BART is discussing station closures and service cuts that would make the downtown recovery even harder to achieve. Now let's be real about where things actually stand in 2026, because the story isn't only collapse, it's collapse alongside a genuine and fragile attempt at recovery. Mayor Daniel Lurie came into office promising a reset, and the early signs are not nothing. Crime citywide fell nearly 30% in 2025. Car break-ins hit a 22-year low. Homicides reached their lowest level since 1954. Conference bookings at the Moscone Center are up nearly 50%. AI companies leased nearly 1 million square feet of office space in 2025 alone. New restaurants are opening. Nintendo, Zara, and Pop Mart brought new retail life to Union Square. The World Cup is coming to the Bay Area, which will inject serious tourism dollars. For the first time since 2022, Union Square retail vacancy actually ticked down in the third quarter of 2025. A small move, but a direction change that matters. So the city isn't lying when it talks about a comeback. There are real green shoots here. The question is whether they're enough. Here is the honest answer. Nobody knows yet. The structural problems, the office vacancy crisis, the BART funding cliff, the population decline, the budget deficit, the housing shortage that keeps driving people out, those do not resolve themselves because a few new restaurants opened and crime dropped. Recovery requires something harder than optimism and press releases. It requires the city to make decisions it has consistently avoided, build more housing at every income level, convert empty office buildings into residential units despite the regulatory nightmare of doing so, fund transit through mechanisms that don't depend on a ridership base that may never return to 2019 levels, and address the fentanyl and homelessness crisis with real treatment infrastructure and not just enforcement theater. The people who love San Francisco, and there are millions of them, want it to work. This city has reinvented itself before. The gold rush, the earthquake, the AIDS crisis. Every time San Francisco found something to anchor its next chapter. The difference now is that the forces working against it are structural, not episodic. Remote work didn't happen to San Francisco. It happened to every city. San Francisco just had further to fall. Whether it lands on its feet or keeps falling, that answer is being written right now in City Hall decisions and ballot measures and lease signings and the quiet daily choices of whether people decide this city is still worth the price of admission. So where did everyone go? Some of them are in Austin, some are in Sacramento, some are still here, waiting to see if the version of San Francisco they fell in love with comes back. And that's a question worth taking seriously. Drop your thoughts below. Have you been to San Francisco recently? What did you actually see? And if this kind of deep dive investigation is what you're here for, you already know what to do.